Hello again, everyone. It's another watch party, which I like how the word party is associated with this stuff. Like, it's super fun. It's supposed to, communicate just sex appeal and crazy madness, and it's lost
Yeah,
stuff.
because Post-its are so sexy.
It's still lost stuff, people. All right, back off. So we are talking with my friend Karen Skinner, and Karen did a really cool thing where she walked Kim Wilson of our group through a process of a will, and we're going to talk a little bit about what that experience looked like and how Karen's adjusting what she's doing with lawyers moving forward, and some of the cool opportunities for you guys to, through some simple tweaks, really get some big changes in your practice. So what I want you to do is down below, you can make comments, questions, things that you're doing to sort of improve and streamline the processes, what you're changing in some of your steps. I cannot promise that Karen and I will not nerd out a little bit while talking with each other, because this stuff is our jam. But we'll try to keep it as, practical, on the dirt, get you some stuff done as possible. But make sure that you add questions below about how you're changing some of your steps. Karen, I am going to say something to you,
Okay.
and I expect you to tell me how right this is. And I was watching your thing with Kim, and a couple things stood out. And one of them was, clients do not care. They only have two states: done and not done. Right? They don't
Yeah.
care about all your little steps. And I used to go through this all the time as a lawyer, where the client will say, what the heck's going on with my case? And I would email with all the crap I had done in the last week. And the clients do not care. They see done and they see not done. Tell me I'm right.
I think you are right because it goes into this black box, right? They don't know what you do as a lawyer except to produce the result for them in most cases.
Right.
It may be that their results are more like strategic advice, or their results are more hand-holding as they go through a scary process, or navigating them through something they don't understand, explaining a contract, all of that. But that to them is the result. How you get to the result is irrelevant to them. And really, they want the result for the least amount of money, and they want the best result for them, whether that's a quick resolution or whether it's the right result for some, I don't know, personal reason that they're willing to pursue some litigation that you don't think is going to get them the right result, but for them the right result is winning, whatever. There are different results that clients want, and how you get there is the black box of the way you practice law. So they don't really, oh, I've got it. Ah, hey,
Service
Mike
delivery.
Carter
Hey,
is
Mike.
joining me. Yep, go ahead, babe. You can say hi to everybody.
Hello, everybody. I'm Cinderfella.
Hi, Cinderfella. What's great is that you're blurred in the background because Karen's got her super professional. So you're just like this ambiguous dude in the background bringing coffee, crumpets, and tea.
I am an ambiguous dude. There's no question, Mike.
Bring the tea. Good to see you, David. We were. Well, let me nerd for a second. I'm going to share my screen for a second because I want you guys to go watch something that you will not want to watch, but I'm going to tell you to do it anyway, and I will tell you why in a second. This is a video. This is a guy named Nicholas Modig. He is absurdly handsome, so I hope that you will just, for nothing else, just to go watch this handsome Nordic man. Go watch this talk. What he talks about in the book, and I'm going to get a little, or in this video and in his book, I'm going to get a little nerdy about this, is the difference between resource efficiency and flow efficiency. And here's where this matters. What that means is, are the machines in your office, or the in your manufacturing line, or the people in your office, are they working hard? Are they busy? Are they using their time well, right? The Clio Trends report talks about utilization rate. How much of the people who are supposed to be billing, how much are they billing for the amount of time or whatever that they're in there? And that's resource efficiency. That's making sure everybody in your office is like doing the work. Flow efficiency is, when does stuff get done? And what's fascinating about this talk, he's talking about it in the context of breast cancer examination. And they did this study in Sweden or Norway or whatever the ambiguously white Nordic country is. They did this huge study on how long it was taking for a woman to go from I am concerned to a diagnosis and treatment, and it was crazy because what you saw was this line of wait, spike of activity, wait, spike of activity, wait, spike of activity, right? And so because you saw these spikes of activity, the resources, the doctors, were super used, right? They were spending every second of every day doing something. And so they thought the firm was super efficient, really, really getting stuff done, a lot of stuff done. But no, because to the client, all of that wait period was a drag, right? This was a problem. This was a waste. And so what I found really interesting, and I want you to talk about this, Karen, what I found really interesting about your conversation with Kim was Kim described to you step by step what she does in a will, the amount of wait time, right? Especially with that last step when she moved it to the client, said, hey, you guys review this, and then you come in and sign it at your convenience, and that's when you pay me. Huge drag. And
90 days.
Yeah. And if it's me, because I'm panicky about my own work, I'm thinking, cool, it's off on the client now, right? The client is the bottleneck. The client is the problem. Way to go, me. It's not me now. But to the client, whether it's their fault or not, they're pissed. So talk to me about those delays between spikes of activity.
So it's funny because when we think about lean, one of the frameworks that we find the most useful when people are learning to look at their practice differently is the 8 wastes. And those are summarized. There's a mnemonic for that called downtime, DOWNTIME, downtime. Each letter stands for a particular kind of waste. And W stands for waiting waste. And waiting is a huge source of waste in law. Because we have valued being busy over necessarily the client's need for the result. We valued our own busyness over producing the result for the client. We haven't really focused enough effort on how much time it's taking, what the waiting is between these different steps. So, for Kim, she's got this will process, and she gets the client comes in, the paralegal, the receptionist greets them, they make an appointment, then they do a conflicts check, and then a while later, the client comes in for the first meeting, and that seems like it's okay from the lawyer's perspective. But there's a delay in there, and there's waiting in there when that client isn't getting a will, and actually is probably thinking, do I really need a will? And something like wills, that initial delay is really important. You got to get past that as fast as you can, because people have this aversion to getting wills, and it's a difficult obstacle to overcome. People are nervous about getting a will.
Right.
We know, right. And everybody knows that just writing a will isn't going to make you die, but writing a will makes you think about dying, and that makes people uncomfortable. So you don't want any delays between the time that they decide they're going to come in and get a will until the time they walk away with a signed will. You have to minimize that delay just psychologically to keep the clients feeling like they're getting something without worrying about dying. So there was an initial delay period there. Then the clients went away, came back, they filled out a form. They actually sat in her office and filled out all of their details in this long form. So that's getting them in there and giving them all this, getting all the information from them. And then at the end of that period, let's say it took them an hour to fill out the form, or half an hour, depending on how fast they filled it out and what information they needed to provide and how long it took them to look up various people's addresses and postal codes and things like that. They would fill out the form, and then they'd have a meeting with the lawyer. So she'd sit down with them, and then she'd talk them through the wills. And only at that point would she even quote them a price. So she's invested time, they've invested time, there's still no price. They can still walk away at that point. And they still don't have a will. Then they go away, the paralegal does the will, and there's the draft of the will gets sent to the client, and then there's this long waiting period that you mentioned. All this time, there's maybe a couple of hours worth of work from the firm, but the client has waited, let's say, a couple of weeks to get the first appointment, then a couple of weeks for the draft, then they have that draft in hand, and then it takes them a couple more weeks to get the will. I mean, we're talking, it could take a long time. And there's also a waiting piece in the middle there. I don't have the map up on the wall anymore. I should have left it. But there's another waiting piece in the middle where the paralegal finishes it. She hands it to the lawyer. But because there's no deadline, because the client hasn't actually even scheduled a signing appointment yet, it goes into the yellow box, which is how she files things. She's got a yellow box. It sits in that yellow box because there's no deadline. So her initial process had these waiting periods built in all the way along. And every single one of those waiting periods meant it could take a couple of months before the client actually got the will.
Yeah, and I want to talk about some of the lawyer bottlenecks, but that client bottleneck is really interesting to me because you're trying to get client behaviors, right? You're trying to get these human beings to do something, and how I'm curious in terms of like tactics for there's a really good book called Nudge, and it's about how you get people to, do certain behaviors that they wouldn't think to do. So they give the example of if you lay out a school cafeteria so that the vegetables are first, they're more likely to grab the vegetables before they get others, right? So just positioning it so that there's just differently, so the people's behavior change. I'm curious, a lot of these behaviors are nudge-needing client behaviors. What kind of nudges can you give to push these clients to get you stuff faster?
Okay, so we were talking about that today, and because actually Kim and I had another session today where we looked at her process map and we actually wrote out her new process step by step, and that's part of the product that we're putting together. And we talked a lot about client motivation because we discussed in her new process that instead of having the client call in and make an appointment and then a couple weeks later show up for the appointment and then fill out all the form, they're actually going to fill out the form at the beginning. So the first thing that's going to happen is the receptionist is going to email them a fillable PDF. Ultimately, everything on that fillable PDF will go through a document automation system and fill out the documents. She's not there yet. And that's okay, one step at a time.
Right.
So she's going to have a fillable PDF for clients to fill out and submit. And then the discussion was, how do you best motivate that client? Because at this point, they still haven't paid. So or they still haven't even agreed to pay. So you want to motivate that client by giving them a form that's easy to fill out, really easy to submit, that has enough explanation in it to keep them going, because sometimes they won't understand. So you want to make sure it's really, really clear. So those are all things that will keep the client going. And then the issue was, well, how do we make them return it to us on time? So the idea was she's going to test two different ideas because she doesn't necessarily know.
Right.
And that's the thing. Like when you do process improvement, you have to test things out. You don't know which behaviors your clients are going to respond to or which prompts they're going to respond to the best. So they're going to fill out the form. They're going to schedule an appointment at that time to come back to see their draft will and meet with the lawyer. So that is going, and then they're going to be told at that point. So they get their form and they're told, okay, you have to return this within 48 hours of having your meeting. We need it 48 hours before the meeting so that we can prepare your documents and you'll come in and we'll discuss them. So they're given a deadline to fill it out on the understanding that they will they can come in and have their meeting with the attorney, but only if they've returned the documents. So if they haven't returned the documents...
So is the idea that you just say, hey, this is required, right? You're just saying to the client, in order to have this meeting, you have to have returned this stuff? Is that the only incentive or whatever you're giving is do it?
Well, it's also going to make the whole meeting a lot faster. So the incentive for the client is if you fill all this stuff out ahead of time, then when you arrive, you're already going to have your draft. And if there are no changes, so if you filled everything out correctly the first time, and there are no changes, because you've got a fairly straightforward situation and you agree with the standard clauses of all of the wills, then you can actually sign that day. You don't even need a second appointment. So the idea is to get them to fill it out as accurately as they can so that they don't have to have the second appointment.
Yeah,
That's
well,
one thing.
and I just as an aside, when I was listening to her session, I kept thinking, how is she not collecting money up front? But really, in Texas at least, even if she were to receive the $1,500 or whatever for the will, if her contract is written such that she earns the money, the reason they're giving her $1,500 is for a will, she couldn't even move it from her IOLTA account theoretically anyway until the thing was done. But I was thinking about it might even be worth her like taking 25% off if they'll friggin' hurry up and get it done, just so she can go to the next one. Like there's just this value in going to the next one. But I was thinking also of clients who come in with a bleeding neck problem, right? Like not a oh, this is nice to have and I should have a will and I'm a responsible adult and I'm when it, but they come in with a criminal case, they're in jail. Even with those people, it is hard to get documents back that you asked for, right? And
Yeah.
that gums up the works.
Yeah, it does. And so that's what she's going to test. She's going to test them filling out the form when they first come to her and returning it before their appointment. And she's going to test whether, if they don't do that and they still come to their appointment, then she can go through it with them, but it's going to take longer. Right. And she's also going to try out not giving them an appointment until they've submitted the forms. And we've got other clients who do that. But the caution there, from our perspective, is you want these people to get a will, and will is already hard, and it's not like they're buying a house and they have to fill out the documents before they can sign for their house because they get a house. That's better than getting a will. So, there's a fine line. So she's going to test a few things to see what motivation clients respond to. She does everything flat fee. So she does want to keep it as super efficient as possible from her perspective and minimize the number of touches she has to have. So in the ideal world, they fill out a form that's, created as accurately and as simply as possible from the client's perspective, so they don't have to think too hard and they can just fill this stuff out.
So here's a funny aside on that. So through the miracle of technology, I am able to pull in comments real time as people make them under this video. And because, of course, we're speaking of Kim in the third person, she is in here making comments. And right before you said that, she said the document has to be pretty simple.
Yeah.
Right? So
I got the book on my other screen. I can see her.
Yeah,
right there.
and I don't want to get too in the weeds on this specific process, but because people could go watch this video because it's really cool to go through a specific process, but also because not everybody's dealing with wills. But I when I'm thinking about these wills, and it's the same for every practice area, the more intense I make the questions, the more likely they're not going to get done when I want them to be. How do I figure out the trade-off with, I want the friggin' information to be able to help you, but I don't want to scare you off?
Well, I think the first thing you have to do is figure out your minimum. It's like this whole minimum viable product idea. You need to have the minimum amount of information to produce a basic draft of a document. So if it's a will, Kim's got a list of a bunch of questions that she would normally run through with clients when she's sitting in the meeting. To produce the draft of the will, there might only be 6 or 7 of those that she really needs to produce a basic draft. The others are all tweaks and questions and things. So you just ask the basics.
Yeah, this I loved because I one of the principles in Nudge is about dopamine and making people feel like they're making progress, right? So to be able to show somebody within X amount of time, here's a will that's 25% of the way there, but here's a tangible thing you can get a hold of, and there's highlights on it for stuff missing and colored, but you can use visuals for this to make it clear to them. You can even use Post-it notes. Here's the things that you're missing, but we're showing them. Jay Thunberg in his book, and I always make fun of it because I think it's a crazy line, but I also get. He said, we're in the business of creating paper as lawyers. Like, we want to send as many letters, and like, even if we send an email, we will print it, put it in an envelope, and mail it to them so that they can open it up and say, progress, right? Like, you want to feed that quick win kind of feeling. So give them some wins, right? I'd rather have, instead of having a document that asks them for the world, have these steps. They can win, move to the next thing. Win, move to the next thing.
Absolutely. And it has to be that way because you just need them to fill out the basics. And Kim and I talked about this fine line between overwhelming people at the beginning and they never come back, and just getting the basics so you can get a basic draft together. And then she still has her meeting with them, goes through it all, makes whatever changes need to be made, does whatever explanations at that point are needed. And then but they have something tangible. They see that the lawyer has produced something. A lot of we talked about this at the beginning, that this idea that clients only want the result, it's because they have no idea what we do in the meantime. They can't get their heads around what it is that we're doing in the meantime. And most of that is because a lot of what we do, besides generating paper, happens inside our heads.
Right.
And they can't see what's going on inside our heads. They know that they're valuing the information that we provide to them, or they're valuing the thinking that we're putting into their case, but they can't see it. So it doesn't matter.
I was thinking about too in this scenario, other like court and process bottlenecks, right? Which still piss the client off, even though it's legitimately entirely not your fault. Often, right? So I worked for a firm that did nursing board licensing and pharmacy board licensing. Like somebody got in trouble for putting some kind of opioid in a pizza box and trying to, run off out of the pharmacy with it. And so they got their license suspended. And they were waiting on a hearing before this administrative board. And it took over a year to get this hearing. So every time we as the firm were talking about this case, we would say, waiting on the board. This was our status update over and over, waiting on the board. In those scenarios where the client is still dealing with this crazy anxiety, right? So even though in terms of legal process, there's a year of nothing, there is something. Something is going on. What do you do? What can we do with clients, do you think, to show movement and keep that dopamine rush when the court or the process is the holdup?
That's a really good question. I think it depends a lot on the practice. It depends a lot on the relationship that you've built with clients over time. I think the problem is I'm giving that lawyer answer. It depends. It depends a little bit on the sophistication of the client and whether they're the general counsel of a company and they want to have regular updates or quarterly updates, or whether they don't. They may not need them. They might know perfectly well that it takes 6 months to get a hearing or 8 months to get a hearing. So they're not fussed, and they know you're only going to contact them if there's been movement. If there's nothing happening, then they don't expect to hear from you because they don't want to be billing. They don't want you to be billing.
Yeah,
right? So
I'm thinking of Lee Rosen practices in North Carolina, and there they have a year-long waiting period for a divorce, which, by the way, is insane. To be able to, from start to be able to finalize your divorce, there's a year. And those people are going through a lot of emotions during that time. And he has just created an enormous library of content, just stuff that they can engage with. So when they're dealing with their daily lives and something pops up, part of his process, part of his, service design process is they can go in, and when they're feeling crazy anxiety, I think they even for a while, I don't know if they still do this, had like a client portal where they could go in and anonymously share their feelings with other anonymous clients about, this is what I'm going through, how are you guys talking to your kids, right? There's this social experience. But yeah, when you've got these court and process bottlenecks, I really think you got to think through the client's experience on that as well.
And you have to figure out what's going to work for them. And maybe it is just the ability to log on and see what the progress is.
Right.
We have a lot of clients. We've done a number of projects that are in immigration firms, right? And people are super anxious. They want to know if their permanent residency is coming through, or if they've got the business visa that they need to travel, or whatever it is. And so they're constantly calling the lawyers and interrupting the lawyers and causing their own delays. But at the same time, the lawyers often have nothing to report because it can take a really long time for these things to work through. So what they've done is created a client portal where you just log in and it's all secure, and you log in and you can see the progress of your case. And that was actually interesting because it's what the clients want. They want to be able to see that their case is moving forward, but you have to do it carefully, because if it isn't moving forward and it's got nothing to do with the law firm, but everything to do with the process itself on the court or the government administration side, then you do end up seeing things that are stalling. So the clients can be quite upset when they see that things have stalled at that sort of administrative level. So you do have to provide them with other information. And I think Lee Rosen, I didn't know he was still practicing, because last I heard he was like traveling the world.
Yeah, no, he sold his practice, but they still work under the same.
Yeah, and he has some really great ideas about how to keep people engaged and to give people that content. And maybe it's not content related to their specific case, but they can at least log in and go, hey, what about a will? How long does a will typically take? Or what about that family law case? Or how long, what's happening at these different points in the process? And again, part of it is that clients can't see what's in our heads. And because our business is so knowledge-based, they don't understand what's in our heads, and they only want, like we said at the beginning, they just want that result. And so anything that delays that result is a frustration for them. If they can at least see that there's progress somehow, then you can reduce some of that frustration.
And I sort of wish, I don't know, just as an aside, guys, you can post questions and comments below, and we can address those. I'm going to pull over one from Kim. I sort of wish that there was a way. I mean, I said if you order Domino's pizza, I don't know if you guys have this in the Northland, but I assume you do. If you order from Domino's Pizza, they've got that little ticker on there that you can see the order came in, it's in the oven, we're testing for quality, it's on your way. Just like to be able to quick go in and see something is happening. And I'm thinking of the idea of, I wonder what the cost is to a lawyer of cases sitting around. So like that firm, that it would take a year, we thought, oh, cool, I don't have to screw with this right now because waiting on the board. But every bit of emotional and cognitive energy that we were using on paying attention to the fact that the Jones case is still sitting there, right? And I turn and I look at my bookshelf and I've got a bunch of Jones cases that are just sitting there waiting. There's costs to every case that you have sitting around, not just to the client, but to you.
Yeah, there is. And because some of that delay is built into the system, it's hard to see how to alleviate it, except to be transparent and tell people what you can about the progress. With respect to those boxes sitting around, I mean, I'm all for moving everything digital and having a really nice matter management board on your screen, and you can see it.
Hide it.
And I know, Kim, if you're still listening, there's the famous yellow box that she has in her office that has all these wills.
She just posted, she said, damn yellow files in my case. Yeah.
Exactly. That is stress inducing. One of the reasons we talk a lot about going and creating a matter management board that gets your to-do list onto a sort of visual board that you can work with is that having having a to-do list that's 15 pages long that sits beside your computer on the desk every day is really stressful to look at. Yeah. And if you can at least break things down into tasks that you can move along, it's the same with the clients. If you can break things down into tasks that can move along, even if they're moving in small increments, it's incredibly satisfying to move something from one column to the next or to cross something off your list.
Yeah.
I mean, that visual cue you talked about is excellent. It's a great idea, and firms are using it. I mean, this immigration firm is using this sort of progression thing for their clients, and it helps.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you a story because I'm a nerd. I taught my daughter what a Kanban board is, and okay, before you guys just glaze over, we'll call it the stuff got done board. So I go into my daughter's room, and she had made a list because everybody's homeschooled now, right? And so she's freaking out. And so she sits down and she makes a list. And I'm going to tell you right now, a list is a terrible way to manage tasks. It's overwhelming. It makes you feel like you've got a ton to do. It's not prioritized in any way. It's super hard to keep track of. Don't do lists, okay? Don't do lists. Lists are for quality control, not for task management. That's a different thing. That's a checklist. So I go into my daughter, and she's anxious, right? She's, whatever she is, 14, and she's wound up, and she's anxious. And I was like, this is not how you need to do this, Maya. The way you need to do is you need to have a to-do and a doing and a done. And I was like, how many... Yeah, it's right over there on the wall. I was like, and if you weren't blurred, we could see that. But I was like, you can only have one thing in doing at a time, right? So This is Kanban board basics for you guys.
Yep.
You've got your to-do list, and by the way, my to-do list on a daily basis is 3 things. That's all I put on my to-do list. And then if I've got time to move other things over, I'll do that. But then I'm doing one thing at a time, and I'm doing it until it's freaking finished, and then I move it over to the done pile. There's other categories with this, but I like when John Grant, who I spoke to earlier on the phone, actually. Hi, John. I love you if you're watching. But John and I were talking about this at one point. We were talking about these Kanban boards, and something he does that I think is really cool is he'll take a Post-it note and he'll draw a big old $sign on it like this, and then he'll go to that space between doing and done, and he'll just put this up on the wall, and he'll be like, I need you to know that every time you move something from doing to done,
that's when you get the ka-ching.
You should hear a cha-ching. Not, with billable hours. This is where the billable hour becomes a counter incentive, but he made the point that for clients anyway, that's when the cha-ching happens, when you're moving it over. And so do a Kanban board. If my 14-year-old can do it in her creative space, there was a picture on Twitter with her Christmas lights all strung up and her dolls all over her thing, and on the wall there was a Kanban board, and I've never been prouder as a father.
You know what? Our kids do it too, because that's one of the things that we teach is we call them matter management boards, because most lawyers' eyes glaze over when they hear Kanban, even though it's a much easier word to say. Yeah. So we call them matter management boards. We teach a whole course on it because it's just such an effective way to manage your work, to manage every single task as they move along, or to manage all your open matters as they're moving along. And it gives you that visual picture. What I think people don't understand when they make a list, they think, oh, well, that's visual, but it isn't, because you've got to read everything and there's so many lines and you can't move stuff around. Whereas if you have a list or a Kanban board and you've got your tasks on cards, you can move them around. And it's way more satisfying than just crossing them off. And your brain processes information 60,000 times, processes visual information 60,000 times faster than text.
So I wanted to get practical on it. And again, you guys can ask questions and comments below about how to fix your processes and we can respond to it. I was looking, so I'm very Post-it note driven, but I've got 2 projects that I'm working on that are ongoing and have collaboration effects, and really hard with Post-it notes to share with somebody else. It's just, we were talking about this before we got on. It's just a hard thing to do. And even though I love the visual, and honestly, I hate Trello, which is like the online version of this stuff, and it's supposed to be shared, but it brings all the inefficiencies of Post-it notes, but none of the good things about Post-it notes to me, so it really drives me. You may have a different take on this. But I was looking at Asana, which I used to use all the time for collaborations because it's really great for sharing stuff with people, but it's very list-driven, where like a Monday.com is... it's a Gantt chart, which, again, nerdy, but it just means it thinks in time-expanded projects. So like court cases, right? Like it's not a task. It's not I've got to do a thing. It's here's this large thing we're doing expanded over time. Deadlines are marked. Tasks are marked in that. Of these kinds, and maybe some other way to manage tasks on a team, how do you do that?
Well, we do a combination of things. So we have Trello, and it's working at the moment, but I totally get what you're saying about how it doesn't have some of the nice features that some of the automated systems have, because it doesn't send automated reminders and things without a little bit of back-end work, and it doesn't necessarily do some of the Post-it stuff. But
it doesn't give you that drug feeling that moving a Post-it note over does. It's just not the same. Like if I drag in a thing and I don't get the same, I'm like, I've got all these draggings.
I still like dragging. The dragging works for me, but
maybe I'm more emotionally complex, Karen.
One of the things that we use, it could be. One of the things that we use when we have to collaborate with clients on long-term projects. So right now we've got one on that was a process improvement project we did with a multinational, and everybody's working remotely. This was even before the whole COVID thing. The project started in January, and we're now doing the implementation remotely. And we have all of their projects that they want to accomplish set up in Smartsheet. And we use Smartsheet because Smartsheet has a card view and a Gantt view and a list view. So it actually works for everybody, depending on how you think. So what you can do is you can put all your tasks in a list, and you can put them all in cards, and you can order them whichever way you want. You can build a contact list in there so you can assign tasks to people. You can set up reminders. So it's kind of like a hybrid. I haven't worked with Asana. I've seen Asana. Likewise with Monday.com. I haven't worked with it either. But because you can put all the deadlines in really easily, and you can then flip to a calendar view and you can see when everything's due, then you can flip again to the card view and you can move your cards between the phases of your matters. So you can set everything up just like you would in a Trello board or in a Kanban board like we have on the wall. And then all of your tasks go in your tasks to, I think Smartsheet calls them uncategorized. They can all go in there, but you can add all the data, you can attach documents, you can put comments. So it works really well when we're collaborating with clients on these larger projects. Because you can flip to the Gantt chart and see when everything's due. You can flip to the calendar view, and on a regular monthly calendar, it tells you when everybody's tasks are due. So for us, it's working really well to collaborate like that on project management of these long-term implementation projects.
I think it's really interesting because I feel like a lot of lawyer training is getting things done, task management type stuff, right? It's thinking about moving tasks along, when really our work is way more like project management. It's way more like a big thing that's got a time component and a ton of steps, and I just don't feel like lawyers are very good at project management, which is a different thing. Time management is a very different exercise. I keep recommending it, but there's a great book by Melissa Gregg on this called Counterproductive, and it's just this awesome diatribe against time management as an idea, and how flawed it is in the modern economy. It just makes me so happy. So you guys should. None of you will read that, but it's really good. And there's
it's actually my Kindle right now, waiting for me to read it.
There's like this whole feminist critique of time management. It's amazing. Anyway, that was nerdy.
Thank you about that, because what we are not taught to think about, we're taught because we're trained, most of us, when we are trained, and in Canada we all train as articling students, so we're basically apprenticed for a while too, so we have this mentoring thing going on. We are trained to bill every minute of our time. Right. So we are trained to think about time and manage our time and not think about tasks as whole entities, and that is a problem. And we're certainly not taught to think about projects because usually we don't have any sense of what the big project is. This is one of the reasons I really like matter management boards, because even when you're the junior associate, you can stand in front of a transaction that's set out on a matter management board with all the tasks and all the phases, each phase that the transaction goes through, and you can see that whole transaction and you can see what needs to happen and who's doing it and when. So they're great for giving people an overview of a project. Every legal matter is a project, and it can be managed like a project with scope and scope control and assumptions and expectations and a budget and timing and a work breakdown. You can do the whole thing. But I shouldn't say nobody, because there are some law schools that are teaching it now, but not as many as I would like. But project management is something we should all be taught. We're not going to learn it going into a lot of law firms right now, because most of the people who would be teaching us, the older lawyers, if you're young and starting out, they're not doing it. Some law firms are starting to really build out their project management teams, and they have project managers assigned to different practice groups, or they have a smaller firm that has an in-house project manager, and that's great because they really can help to keep legal matters moving along, and they can help to train the lawyers to think about checking budget to actual every week and making sure that if they've said it's going to take them 10 hours to get that part of the project done, it takes them 10 hours to get that part of the project done. Or if you want to think about it in terms of more like a calendar and less like billable hours, that has to be done by next Friday, and it's done by next Friday. That's the role of a good project manager, is to keep things on time and on budget and moving. They've got to keep things moving forward.
Which sort of gets to something I've been thinking and writing about a lot lately. And it's a bit the so what question behind this. I feel like there's this incentive to say, if I'm filling my time, if I am productive, if I am efficient, which means, I guess, I'm getting a lot more done in a day, then things are going great. But you still get a lot of data from firms that are like, I don't really care how, if I'm the client, I don't really care how long you're working on this thing. And usually they care a lot about how many billable hours you have. When they don't understand your work and it didn't look like it was getting done, they start to really care about why are you spending so much time on this thing that's not getting done. But I also am aware, and I think you and I have talked about this, of time is not the only stock, right? It's not the only thing that we need to maximize because it's limited. It's more like a constraint than it is a stock, really, right? The stock to me is how much give a crap do I have, right? This is your emotional labor, aspect. I only have so much give a crap in a day. And so all this stuff, I'm going to rant now. All this stuff that I keep seeing about if only solo lawyers would learn to be more efficient, then they could take on twice as many cases for half as much cost, and we'd fill the access to justice gap because we are able to take all of those middle clients. And I'm just sitting here thinking, I can't take 100 clients instead of 50 clients and think that just because I got more efficient, I can handle that because I can't give a crap about that many people. And medicine, who we always fetishize medicine when we talk about this stuff, medicine is freaking out about this problem because these doctors that see 100 people in a day, they can't give a crap about all of those people. And so they just prescribe whatever the salesman came in and told them to prescribe the thing. And it usually has disproportionate racial outcomes, which piss me off. It's these, pregnant African American. I think we talked about this in our session before. We have disproportionate results, including with justice, because people are overworked and stressed out, and being more efficient and being more productive is not enough. Go ahead, Karen.
But you have to think about what you need the time for, right?
Yeah.
When we talk about being more productive, especially with solos, it's what do you need the time for? You have a limited number of hours in the day, and you can't spend any more of them at the office, and you can't necessarily take on any more work because, you have a limited emotional capacity or cognitive capacity. But you want to do things like get some of that crap work that you hate doing, you get that done more quickly so that you have more time to think more, so that some of that time that you're saving is going into white space, that thinking space. Like, you can't necessarily produce as good a result for a client, whether it's writing them a really great report or whether it's writing a brief for them or putting that motion together, if you're rushing. So if you can get some of that inefficient stuff off your plate, whether you're delegating it or you've figured out how to make the process more efficient or you've got your paralegal doing a pile of it because you're getting that information in ahead of time when the client first comes in, then you've got time to put that cognitive energy into developing something better for your client, into writing something that's easier for them to read. Because let's be honest, it takes actually more time and effort to write a really concise and clear plain English memo or email than it does to write a whole pile of legalese.
Heretofore, hereinafter.
Exactly.
Thusly.
So you gotta really think about what you want the time for. And I think people need to be more efficient so that they've got more time to think and not necessarily take on 6 more clients, but to produce better results.
And then imagine, what if you build for that kind of, you found some way to monetize that kind of effort as opposed to monetizing you just doing some stuff. I mean, it gets into big issues. I guess it's such a pet peeve to me because I care a lot about the emotional state of solo and small firm lawyers, and I'm sort of concerned about the obsession with growth, because we've got all these status indicators, and none of these things actually make us happy, the research says, but we've got these things that we get super concerned about, and we start focusing on all the wrong things. So anyway, sorry, rant,
it's
people.
Okay. You can rant.
It's a rant. And it's funny because I really like efficiency. I really like productivity. I don't know if I believe fully, and not that you said this, in the idea that if only I could become more efficient, then I could, go to the beach or what. I mean, sure, that's true. But your point is well taken, that it also makes it so your work is the creative, important work that you came to this freaking business for in the first place, right?
Yeah. And so, what you have to think about is what really grinds you down at the end of the day is thinking that you did all this work and you accomplished nothing, right? That's what really grinds you down. And if you can know that you put the right amount of effort into a client's matter, that you solved the problem in a new or creative way, or you added value, then you can price your work differently. You know that you're walking out at the end of the day having actually done what you wanted to do, and you're not super stressed thinking about the next thing that you've got to accomplish all the time. You got to get off that hamster wheel. So I do think we need to focus on efficiency, but I know your famous churn, but we need to focus on efficiency, but people need to get really clear on what they want to be efficient for, right. And that's what it is, right? And for some people, it is going to be getting home earlier, although not right now because nobody wants to go anywhere because we're all stuck at home anyway. But, you've got to just figure out what it is and where you add value. And right now, I think people adding value isn't necessarily churning out a whole pile of these things. Adding value is producing the right result for your client in the right amount of time with the right amount of effort. And it has to be what your client wants and is willing to pay for, which is, another thing. So if you're just churning and you're producing out really low quality results, that's not going to get you where you want to go as a lawyer. It's not going to help your practice really in the end because you're not going to have the reputation that you want. It's hard, but it's
get the book, people.
Efficient.
Get the book. Just read the book, okay? I'm sorry. I'm tired of ranting about these things. I apologize, people. Just read the book. So, I think, and I would encourage everybody to go back and watch the session with Kim, and the reason is that there's a value just in walking through it. Just in putting up on the board, because I swear to you, you will have, and you could see sometime, I love you, Kim, you could see in Kim's face sometimes this like, do I really do that? Like, just this cringy shame, like, I hate that I do that thing, which it's important that you work through that. But also, there's stuff that you didn't even realize that was slowing up the flow of your thing, that you never took a second to say, if I make this little tweak, and that in this session with Kim, Karen, you found these little tweaks that were huge leverage points for all those other issues. So I would encourage you guys to all go back and watch that session. I think it'll help you a lot. And then also, follow up with Karen in terms of this new. Tell me about you're changing the way you're teaching lawyers to do this. I'm going to give you however much time you need to talk through. What are you doing now in terms of teaching lawyers how to do this kind of work?
Okay, so the process mapping we have always done as part of a large project where we go on site and we work with a group of lawyers and we map their process out start to finish and we do a process redesign and often with larger teams and complicated processes. And we thought, there's so much value in working with smaller teams. And smaller firms are much more agile than some of these larger firms. They can make changes quickly. So we have great clients, but there were times when it was really frustrating to work with these really large firms because we'd do a process redesign and then they would never do anything with it. We'd make a really great future state map. Because it's all from them. The ideas come from the clients. How do we want to tweak it? We guide them, but most of them, they see, like you said with Kim, they see what it is that they're actually doing on the wall and they're like, oh my God, why did I do it this way? And getting over that, it's just the way we've always done it, by visualizing your work is huge. Kim said it herself a couple of times. She's like, just like saying these steps out loud makes me see what's wrong with them. So we thought there's got to be a way to do it differently. First of all, we're all at home, so nobody's going traveling and doing these big engagements. And we believe, my partner and I, that there is huge value in working with smaller firms where they can make changes quickly and see huge impacts. And sometimes the changes are really small. Like some of the things that we're switching around in Kim's process, they're not huge things.
Right.
She's going to be done and dusted and have her new process working by the 11th of May, right, Kim? That's what she's promised. That's not a lot of time. And the way we did it only took, I think, about 3 hours of our time with her. The way that we're going to structure this new way of doing process mapping is entirely online and entirely focused at solos and small firms. We're going to look at limited processes, so they may be processes that are in what we call the bookends, so the intake and the collections, billing, and closing out, or they may be legal processes like this one, which was how to do this will. But they got to be short because we have a limited amount of time.
Right.
But sometimes these short processes are the ones you forget about because you're like, oh, you know what? It just doesn't take me very long anyway. It only takes me 30 seconds here. It only takes me an hour there. All that added up. When Kim saw how much time she put into her process, she was like, oh my God, there's like so many touches. So that's one of the things that's really great about mapping is you see where all these issues are. So what we did is we started off with an initial phone call. And we didn't do a survey with her, but I think going forward we're going to do a quick survey too. And we do what we call a practice assessment survey, and that takes about 15 minutes for the lawyer to fill out. And then we'll have a phone call. In that phone call, we would help to decide what process we're going to look at, where the biggest pain points are in that process. And David and I, my partner and I, start to get a sense of where the direction that new designed process would go. Then we come back for a second hour, so that's 1 hour of phone call, then 1 hour online where we will do a process map. And right now we're doing them up on our wall, so the process map will happen on our wall. We're testing out, Mike and I, you and I were talking before we got on the live call, but we're going to test out different online systems, different platforms that might let us do it online. But right now what we're going to do is do a Zoom call like we're doing, well, this is Skype, but do a video call like this, where we will share where people will see the wall, and we will map out that process step by step by step. We have our own little set of specially designed stickies for process mapping, and we always use pink stickies for the waste. So whenever I see the pink stickies on the wall behind you, I think, ooh, are those problems? Because the pink stickies are always the problems. And what we'll do is we'll map it all out, and we'll talk it through. And as you map out your process, you start to see where the problems are. And every time there's a problem, we put a pink sticky on. So there's yellow stickies for the process blocks, pink stickies for the problems, and then we discuss those problems as we go along. So we get that process mapped out in an hour, and then we say, what would it be like if? Or wouldn't it be great if? And then we talk through a few key changes to redesign that process. And in the end, so that takes about an hour. By the end of that hour, we have a pretty good idea of a few things, maybe 3 to 5 key things that have to change in that process, which steps we can eliminate. And in Kim's process, we did eliminate quite a few. I don't have a picture up in front of me, but I think we eliminated 5 or 6 steps that were taking a lot of time. One of them that we've eliminated is this 90-day loop where you've got the clients not getting back to you with the changes on their will. So that's a really huge time saver.
Right.
And then we're going to do a third call, and that's a third hour. And in that third hour, we walk through the process map and the redesigned steps. So for each new step or each change, we write it all down. So there's going to be essentially a list until we can, because we're just getting started with this process. So eventually it may be more of a map, but right now it's going to be essentially a table. And for each process step, if there's an action item that the lawyer has to do, some new project, a new template that they need, or an email that they know that they're going to have to send, or a new script for the receptionist. Those are the types of things that were on Kim's list. Those are going to be broken down by step. Any comments that we have, and we did that with Kim today, actually. We went through the third hour, we mapped out her whole new process, and for everything that she has to do differently, there are a couple of action items on the lists. She's got it all. Then we fix a deadline date so that there is a deadline. Everyone needs a deadline. And then we're also going to do an accountability call. So there'll be that third hour. We'll have that nice new process laid out in the document with the action items. Then we'll decide with the client when they want to be finished by, and we'll do a 15-minute accountability call the day after their deadline to say, did you do it? Did you not do it? Is there something else we can help you with? For some clients, they may not want it right after. They may want it maybe a week or two before as a sort of what we call a butt kicker call, just to make sure they're still working on it. But we need to build in that accountability. Everybody needs a deadline. So that's what we're going to do.
Well, and I like this process, because it's illustrative, right? You figuring out how to build this thing, being responsive to needs, especially during this, the lockdown period. This is the kind of stuff that a lot of the lawyers have to do, is figure out how to take this thing that you used to do in person on a wall, hanging out with somebody. So it's illustrative. And I also I'm going to share a video just because, again, I'm nerdy on this thread. This is Russ Akoff, who's one of the big people who created systems thinking, but it's about idealized design. That idea of, wouldn't it be nice if, what's the thing that we can come up with, like remove constraints. Now that we've got it up on the board, we've got the issues on the board, remove constraints and start thinking through stuff. He's got this really cool story of how he snuck into a meeting that ended up being an AT&T. We're going to, totally change the company meeting. And his team ended up coming up with like caller ID and three-way calls and all these things that they put on, that none of this was on their, on their board until they did this idealized design process. So it's really cool. And really for you guys, I know this process stuff sounds but I don't care. This is what you do. You are the way that you get the client to their end is what you do. And the more you guys think about this, the more you're going to be able to serve clients and deal with access to justice issues and improve, your own lives. The outcomes for this are huge, so I hope you guys will do it. Karen, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the easiest way to follow up?
They can send me an email, Karen@gimbalcanada.com.
Gimbal. I hope you guys will do that. And remember to check on the left side on the events tab. We're going to have more conversations. Go look at the ones that you want to go, you think I might be interested in. Click going, and it will send you alerts just for that event so that you know when it's happening and stuff. So make sure you do that. And you can also continue to post questions and comments below. If you comment this later, you can still carry on the conversation, and we'll pay attention to it. So thank you. Thank you again, Karen, and we will talk to you guys next time. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, everybody.